Hi everyone, I hope that you are all well. I'm not too well at the moment, unfortunately. On Bank Holiday Monday I got bitten by a bug or stung by a wasp, I don't know what, but I've got a pretty nasty infection in my ankle at the moment and I haven't been able to really walk for a couple of days. So it's meant I've had to spend a couple of days working from home and of course sat around when I'm not working, not doing much. So what have I been doing? I've been reading. And I'm here to talk about the book I've been reading this week, which is My Story by Marilyn Monroe, her autobiography, which she wrote with Ben Heist. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She basically dictated what she wanted to say about herself, and he put it to paper, and it was archived away by this man called Milton H. Green, who set up a series of photos with Marilyn over the course of about 4 years, and he was her favourite photographer. They got on so well, and so it kind of got locked away until after she passed away, and it was about 10 years or so after she passed away that this was published. And this is the limited edition version that comes with the various photos from the Milton Green collection. His son Joshua writes the foreword of this book because Milton died in 1985, and so he explains about the photographs, how it came about and everything, and it was a really interesting read. But of course it's mainly Marilyn's words. It's only 186 pages long, because unfortunately that's all that she wrote, or all that she dictated, should I say, to Ben before she sadly passed away. And it's really interesting as well at the point where it ends, because she's just married Joe DiMaggio, the baseball player, and they're going off on their honeymoon, and off to Japan, and she's been asked to basically go perform to soldiers in Korea, and she's talking about her concern of singing Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, and then remembering the little dance that she did at the end of the number and doing that for them and hoping that they'll like it, and they're all cheering and such, and that is the point where the book ends. And I kind of like that it ends like that it ends on a high for her rather than on the downward spiral that would then take over her later on in life. I didn't really know much about Marilyn Monroe. I knew various things, because there's always things that, with film and Hollywood and all that lot, where you learn things about actors and such. And I'd seen like biographies of her, like on TV, where they're only like half an hour to an hour long. That's it. Didn't really know anything about her at all. So reading this was a real eye-opener, and there was some really eerie stuff where she talks about her persona, and at one point she ends a chapter saying that from the perspective of Hollywood and everyone, and she knew it herself, she says, I am one of those girls who would be found dead in her bedroom with a bottle of pills clutched in her hand. And it was just, I read that and I was like, oh, I had to take a bit of a step back, because I was really taken aback by that, and what happened to her, how it really linked. It was so odd. But the one thing I absolutely adored about this book was understanding who she was. It really opened her up for me. I never thought that she was this blonde, dumb blonde that she got shown as being in the public eye. I always thought her to be incredibly smart, that she, and it came across in this as well, that she has real stern morals, and she talks about how she has offer after offer of having sex with producers and such to get her name in lights, and she flat out refuses them. She has points where, just people in the street, men that she meets in bars. One guy, he's a con artist trying to sell Silver Star metal, badges on the street for soldiers, and he he proposes to her within like 10 minutes of meeting her. And she basically explains why he doesn't want her, and he gets kind of miffed and walks off. And I love that about her integrity, the way that she viewed the world. It was so interesting, and I want to read a bit of this because I found it so interesting. When I was saying about how her personality and all this lot, she was a very shy girl. She really didn't know much about sex, even though she was a really, kind of sexy kind of girl. She developed very early, and she noticed boys started flocking around her when she didn't have any interest in them whatsoever. She didn't really have a thought to sex until she fell in love, and the way that she talks about things is also very blunt. She gets to the point, which I really love about her. But that getting to the point, the opening of the first chapter is a bit like, oh, okay, and I'll explain what I mean by reading this. Okay, this is the very first paragraph. I thought the people who I lived with were my parents. I called them Mama and Dad. The woman said to me one day, "Don't call me Mama. You're old enough to know better. I'm not related to you in any way. You're just bored here. Your mama's coming to see you tomorrow. You can call her Mama if you want to." That was so striking. I mean, it's not starting off, oh, I was born, named Norma Jean and on this date, yada, yada, yada. She's taking you right into how it felt being an orphan, being passed about to families. And it was a case of, at that time, that with the situation in America with orphans and such, that they were kind of like put into a home, and then people were paid to basically take these orphans off their hands. So whenever she got passed around place to place, she always refers to them as her aunts or her uncles, or the couple. She refers to one as an English couple, which I'm going to read a bit from in a minute. But she always felt like she was being bought and such. She was being sold. She understood that they were getting money from her, and she was made to cook and clean and wash and all this lot. And because of her quiet nature as well, and that also because she was an orphan, and that she was told basically that she was a liar for various things that she said. And at one point, when she's 9 years old, she was sexually assaulted. She was raped by this man, and she told people what happened, and nobody believed her. And it's so tragic that happened. It's awful. But she also talks about how she had this thing about wanting to get people's attention. Maybe it's because of her being an orphan and that, and being passed around, and not felt that she landed anywhere really. That she was in this kind of hell until the only way she could get out of it was if she get married. So she got married at 16 so that she didn't have to go through this system anymore. She talks about how she was obsessed with people wanting to look at her, and every week she fantasized in church that she would just stand up and rip off all her clothes and have everybody look at her, and she had to stop herself. She had to clench her fists and such to stop herself from doing it. And made me think, oh my gosh, to have a child feel that way, that's awful. There's some serious issues, psychological issues there, to me. I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but to me, to have somebody think and feel like that, it really does make you wonder the real hardships that they went through. And I'm going to read a bit from the first chapter as well of this book that I absolutely loved. Now, to give you a little bit of backstory about this chapter, so Marilyn's being passed about in the various orphanages. She's living with an English couple at this time. Her mum, her uncle, and her grandmother are in mental health facilities, mental institutions, as she refers to in this book, and her father is dead. And she's talking about something that happened to her in regards in to do with her mum, and it's so beautiful and so tragic at the same time. Okay, so my mother found another couple to keep me. They were English people and needed the $5 a week that went with me. That's the money that they were given. Also, I was large for my age and could do a lot of work. One day my mother came to call. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. She stood looking at me without talking. When I turned around, I saw there were tears in her eyes and I was surprised. I'm going to build a house for you and me to live in, she said. It's going to be painted white and have a backyard, and she went away. It was true. My mother managed it somehow out of savings and loans. She built a house. The English couple and I were both taken to see it. It was small and empty but beautiful, and it was painted white. The four of us moved in. I had a room to myself. The English couple didn't have to pay rent, just take care of me as they had done before. I worked hard, but it didn't matter. It was my first home. My mother bought furniture, a table with white top and brown legs, chairs, beds and curtains. I heard her say, "It's all on time, but don't worry. I'm working double shifts at the studio and I'll soon be able to pay it off." One day, a grand piano arrived at my home. It was out of condition. My mother had bought it second hand. It was for me. I was going to be given piano lessons on it. It was a very important piano, despite being a little banged up. It belonged to the movie star Frederick Marsh. Frederick Marsh, he was a silent movie star, just so you know. You'll play the piano over here by the windows, my mother said, and here on each side of the fireplace there'll be love seat. We can sit listening to you. As soon as I pay off a few other things, I'll get the love seats, and we'll all sit in them at night and listen to you play the piano. But the two love seats were not to be. One morning the English couple and I were having breakfast in the kitchen. It was early. Suddenly there was a terrifying noise on the stairway outside the kitchen. It was the most frightening noise I'd ever heard. Bangs and thuds kept on as if they would never stop. "Something's falling down the stairs," I said. The Englishwoman held me from going to see. Her husband went out and after a time came back into the kitchen. "I've sent for the police and an ambulance," he said. I asked if it was my mother. "Yes," he said, "but you can't see her." I stayed in the kitchen and heard people come and try to take my mother away. No one wanted me to see her. Everyone said, "Just stay in the kitchen like a good girl. She's all right, nothing serious." But I went out and looked into the hall. My mother was on her feet. She was screaming and laughing. They took her away to the Newark Mental Hospital. I knew the name of the hospital in a vague way. It was where my mother's father and grandmother had been taken when they started screaming and laughing. All the furniture disappeared, the white table, the chairs, the beds, and the white curtains melted away, and the grand piano too. The English couple disappeared also, and I was taken from the newly painted home to an orphan asylum, and given a blue dress and white shirt-waist to wear, and shoes with heavy soles. And for a long time, when I lay in bed at night, I could no longer daydream about anything. I kept hearing the terrible noise on the stairs and my mother screaming and laughing as they led her out of the home she had tried to build for me. I never forgot the white painted house and its furniture. Years later, when I was beginning to earn some money modelling, I started looking for Frederick Marsh's piano. After about a year, I found it in an old auction room and bought it. I have it now in my home in Hollywood. It's been painted a lovely white and it has new strings and plays as wonderfully as any piano in the world. So yeah, I loved that, how something beautiful came out of something so tragic. And I think she was probably about 7 or maybe 8 at the time. And to experience that and have that haunting her and everything going on, and yet it turned into this beautiful thing with the piano and how she found it, she restored it, she took something that was broken and made it new again. It's wonderful. I absolutely loved, and that's the kind of ending of the first chapter. These chapters aren't very long. They're usually probably a maximum of about 4 pages long. So there's quite a few, but this is absolutely filled with the most beautiful photos, and I'll show you my favourite one. There it is. I absolutely adore that photo. Isn't it gorgeous? Of Laurence Olivier and Marilyn Monroe. But this collection is beautiful. I really strongly recommend this limited edition collection book. I'm so glad I got this one now, because the limited edition version was cheaper than the standard version. Why, I don't know, but it was absolutely full of these wonderful pictures, and I'm so glad I bought this version of the book. It's wonderful. I definitely recommend this, but be aware that it's very short. So I think I'd like to read other books about Marilyn Monroe, which cover obviously the whole of her life, not just the parts, the section that we've got up to the point where she got married to Joe. But yeah, I'm really glad I read this. I understand her more now. I loved her honesty, her integrity, her brutality at points, her understanding of the world, her understanding of Hollywood, and where she stood in it all. She was a tragic figure, but she's a beautiful, beautiful person, and it's so sad that she's not with us, that she didn't live longer, but we always have her forever on film and in beautiful photos like the ones here. Now, I don't own any Marilyn Monroe films, regretfully. I might rectify that on a trip to town tomorrow. But one thing that I do have the DVDs and the soundtracks for a series that you might want to check out because it involves Marilyn Monroe is Smash. Now, Smash is about the Broadway musical scene and how the creation of a musical, putting it on stage and everything from the very beginning idea all the way through to what ends a second series of Tony Awards. And two writers, there they are, they get the idea of doing Marilyn Monroe, and it's all about how, you know, they developed it and everything. And it's got the most wonderful songs that relate to Marilyn, which also relate to the characters and what's going on with them, and everything. I absolutely loved Smash. It ran for 2 series. The second series is not as good as the first, I will say that, but I still really enjoyed it. But what they also did, if you want that, they brought out initially the music of Smash, which covers, you know, various songs that they did, original songs, covers, and there are a few tracks from the musical. But then because it became such a hit, they actually did a full cast recording of the musical Bombshell, which is what they make up in the series and produce and put on in Smash. So it is a complete musical about Marilyn Monroe, performed by the cast. It's called Bombshell. I absolutely love it. I think it's fabulous. And what I appreciate now, more that I've read this, is that there are full quotes by Marilyn in this. And my favourite one is actually from the very last song called Don't Forget Me, which is wonderful. But my favourite quote is where she's talking about men and how she's viewed by the world. And she says, for a kiss they pay 1,000, yet they pay 50 cents for my soul. And Marilyn says that directly in this book, and when I read that, I kind of went, oh my god. Not because I'm like, oh yay, you know, it's a link to this, but I understand that quote so much more, and now that song lyric, because of what she's saying, you know, with the rest of the lyric in there, it makes it all the more powerful. And she ends it saying, and that is why I pray you don't forget me. So it makes the musical stronger for me, having that direct link to her voice, to, you know, her quotes and everything. So yeah, I recommend the book, this, you know, wonderful book. I'm going to see if I can find any other Marilyn Monroe books now. I'd really be interested in a full biography, and I think there's actually, from what I can remember looking on Waterstone's website, I think there's a new biography about her actually coming out soon. So I will look that up. But yeah, I recommend the book. I also recommend Smash, and of course the soundtracks as well. But if you want the full Marilyn Monroe musical from Smash, you need to get Bombshell. Okay then, I think that's it. Can't think of anything else to say. Have you read this book? I'd love to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comments box below, or give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Entirely up to you, let you decide. And I'll be back soon to announce which book I'm going to be reading next. Alright guys, bye.